Welcome to a very special welcome to the playoff edition of the Heron Outlet. She's Alex Winley. He's Austin Roblard. I am Ian Hest. And wow, does that feel good to say, guys. Inter Miami is into the playoffs. A 4-1 win, a 4-1 thrashing, dominating performance over their rivals, Orlando City, to earn a spot in the MLS Cup Playoffs. Wow, guys, a lot to talk to. First, congratulations to the club. They have worked so hard for this. So many 20 players in, 20 players out from last year to be able to make this accomplishment. It's basically an expansion team when you think about it that way. Entirely new team almost for what they put on the field this year compared to last. And for them to be able to go on this run now, 4 straight wins to solidify their spot. And now, amazingly enough, with the chance not only to be in the playoffs, but for home field advantage. We'll get to that a little later on, but let's just talk about last night and what is sure to be a night to remember for a very long time. An electric atmosphere, at times felt like a playoff game, but really right off the bat, Leo Campana scores within 35 seconds. And from there, it was all downhill for Orlando and all riding high for the Herons and Inter Miami.
Yeah, I'd go as far to say, and I don't think it's going that far. This is the best win in club history. I don't think that any other game other than the Cincinnati Decision Day game in 2020 really compares to it. This was against your bitter rivals, your in-state rivals. It was a derby match. You went out and you scored 4 goals, almost unanswered if it wasn't for Carr scoring a great one later on in the match. This was everything. All the pressure was on. It was winning in, and this was the best performance that I think they've put out all year. So for me, biggest win in club history, cemented themselves in the MLS playoffs, and gave themselves a chance on decision day to host a playoff game and finish as the 4th best team in the Eastern Conference. Can't say much else about what Phil Neville and the side did last night.
Yeah, I agree. I think, they felt, even listening to Phil Neville in the post-match conference, he's felt extremely cool and collected. The guys knew what they needed to do, and they went out professionally and got the win, and emphatically as well, 4-1 against Orlando, where, their fans are particularly not, they're just not really, I don't know, they're just a bit crazy, but yeah, they went out and won, and convincingly 4-1. It should have been 4-0, maybe even 5, but yeah, they got the job done and against Orlando, and now Orlando are fighting for their playoff lives, and yeah, it was just a really good win overall, and silenced a lot of doubters. At the beginning of the season and throughout the season, we've seen the tweets and commentators from other Inter Miami writers or national writers just say that maybe this couldn't happen because of XYZ, or they're not convinced, but Miami proved a lot of people wrong, and they want to continue playing well. The Neville said they want a home playoff game, and they're going to continue to on decision day try to push for that as well. So yeah, a joyous occasion, but it's clear from Neville's comments last night that they still do want a home playoff game.
Well, I want to talk on 2 points on what you just brought up, Alex. But the first one being whether or not people or who thought that they would be in this position. Austin, you went through last night and checked ourselves and what we thought about it. I want to hear from you because a 4-1 win actually is the second biggest win in club history behind the 5-1 against Cincinnati that you had mentioned in 2020. Also with 14 wins, there's only 5 teams in all of MLS that have more wins than Inter Miami. That being the defending MLS Cup champions in New York City FC, the current Supporter Shield champions in LAFC, the number 1 seed currently in the Eastern Conference, Philadelphia, the number 2 seed challenging them for it in Montreal, and Austin, who's having an amazing year. So with that, ending with Austin, we'll go to Austin. Austin, you checked what we had said to start the year. What was the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Sorry there. So first of all, we all predicted pretty much that this team would be a playoff team. We all said 7th place. Ian, you were a little reluctant when I went back and listened to the audio, but you still stuck with the 7th place. It's interesting to see that myself and Andres both had Higuain as the MVP, given all the stick that he had in the beginning of the season, right after the preseason ended. It didn't look like that was really a possibility, but I guess Andres and I, our predictions stuck through all the way through the end. Alex, you had Malta or Yedlin being the MVP. And if we look at what Malta did last night or the last two games, I have been extremely impressed, and he's been instrumental to this run. Ian, you had Gregory, and I don't think that that's even far off either. I think there's a lot of players you can look at on this team and say they have been instrumental in a lot of key successes down the stretch for this club. Defender of the year, we went back and forth between Christopher McVeigh and Damian Lowe. I think those are the two absolute best shouts that you could have had. And I think we could even have a discussion at the end of the year when everything's all said and done about who is the true defender of the year, because I see the argument for both sides right now. Golden Boot on the team, Ian and Alex had Campana, and myself and Andres had Higuain as well. And honestly, if you look at it,
Right
goals from open play, they both are tied on 11, and Higuain has 5 penalty goals, one last night. So there's 16 goals for Higuain there. So take that how you will. I will say we completely missed on our U22 player of the year for this club. We all said either Emerson or Jairo Quinteros, and well, Jairo Quinteros is not on the team anymore, and Emerson is well, he's not getting a lot of minutes. And you look at Bryce Duke, who actually made the under-22 team for all of the league, which is insane. Was absolutely outstanding throughout the course of this year. And I think the reason, I think we talked about it a little bit last night in our chat, the reason why we didn't have Duke in there is because we didn't see him in preseason. He was injured when he first got to the club, didn't play any preseason minutes. But honestly, if we took Phil Neville's word for it, he had extremely high hopes for Bryce Duke going into the year. If you go back and look at those preseason press conferences and interviews, Phil Neville loved Bryce Duke from the start, and I think he loves him even more now. He's letting him play with a ton of freedom. He's putting his personality on every touch that he makes on the pitch. It's been phenomenal from him, and I think that he would be very pleased with his performance in 2022 and proving us all wrong, of course. And then this is where we have not decided yet what's gone on with this team. So Andres has his team losing in the Eastern Conference semifinal, so winning one and then losing. All three of us, because we put them in 7th place, also have them in the playoffs, and we all have them losing in the first round. Now, if they finish in 4th place, I think any team coming to Drive Pink Stadium is in trouble. And that's kind of where I'll leave it there. We all have a first round exit, but if this team is a home playoff team, I think that they could go on to the Eastern Conference semifinal and maybe try and prove Andres right.
Well, Alex, that's an interesting point there, because if they do get to the 4 seed, they'll play New York Red Bulls in the first round at home, a team that they beat 2-0 at home earlier in the year. And then the second game would be on the road at Philadelphia. That is locked in stone. If they are the 4 seed, that's the path to the Eastern Conference Finals. The only team in the Eastern Conference with a better home record than Inter Miami is Philadelphia Union. They have not lost at home all year long. They are 11-5-0 at home all year. So Phil has made it very clear, especially last night, that they very much want the 4 seed. I understand that. I understand why everybody is very excited. I'll play devil's advocate for a sec in saying that, to me, if you look at the possibilities of making an Eastern Conference final, the 6th seed looks a little more appetizing than even the 4 seed. You would need a monumental result against Philadelphia Union to be able to win that game. Whereas if you're in the 6th seed, you could be on the road at NYCFC, let's say, or even at Red Bulls. If you are able to beat that team on the road in the first round, if you're able to squeak by there, there is the possibility that the second round game would be a home game if whoever the 7th seed is able to knock off Montreal or be at Philadelphia in the first round. So to me, I don't know. I understand why you always want a home playoff game. That makes a ton of sense. But if you're talking a long-term run, I mean, I know I sound like a broken record on this. I go back to RSL last year. Like how they made that run was very strategic in where they were positioned. And so, yes, go for the 4th if you want that. And the club has made it entirely abundant. So I can't argue with that, and I won't argue with that at all. I just don't know if it's the best tactic, knowing that you'll have a midweek game knowing everything that's involved in this, to go full out on Sunday. Like, but they're gonna do it. But I guess I'm trying to play a little devil's advocate there, Alex.
Yeah, and I think maybe I don't know. I think pushing there, I feel like Miami's away form has gotten better throughout the season, but a home playoff game would be huge considering the fact what they did in the off season and getting all those players and questions about Neville's ability to coach and getting a home playoff game after all that would be huge. But yeah, I think now you start thinking about the best possible way to get to the Eastern Conference Finals, and maybe that sixth seed is ideal for them. So you never know, and it all depends on decision day and how the other results fall. But it's certainly possible.
Can I play devil's advocate to your devil's advocate?
Sure.
So my thing is, if you end up as a 6 seed, you start off with a road playoff game, right? You're going away to New York City FC, I believe, and honestly, no idea what stadium we're going to play in if that
Most
ends up
likely
being
New
the
York
case.
City. It could be Red Bulls, but
it could be Red Bulls, but for the most part, it'll be either a New Jersey game or some random stadium in New York that we have no idea where they're going. And then you look past that and you say, yes, well, then you have a chance to see if the 7 seed ends up beating the 2nd seed, and that's the team that you would play at home. So my thing is, do you actually put yourself in a situation where it's not in your own destiny to have an actual home playoff game throughout the whole entire course of the playoffs? Instead, just go out, ensure yourself that you can have a 4th seed and you can have a home playoff game and advance yourself to the next round, because you don't know what's going to happen when you're on the road. And let's just say that they do go on the road to New York and then they do go on the road to Montreal. That's a lot of travel time in a 2-week span. It's going to wear down the team. They haven't been good on the road at all. And I don't think that you take that chance early on in the playoffs. If you have the opportunity, you 100% go for a home playoff game to start the playoffs, start off, head held high, going into Philadelphia saying, you know what, we can actually do this. We got our home playoff game. Our confidence is up. I would rather take that chance rather than hope on a chance that the 7 seed beats the 2nd seed. And most likely you're going to have 2 away games if that is the case. But it's a little interesting to weigh the options back and forth. But for me, I say go all out. And it's not in your own hands, which is the other unfortunate thing. Red Bulls do have to draw or lose, but you still go all out, in my opinion.
And as we have said many times on this channel throughout the season, whenever you need to count on the Red Bulls, they most assuredly do not help you. So needing a result from the Red Bulls, they'll probably wind up winning like 20-0 in this game. But I mean, I understand all of this is conjecture. All of this is what ifs, and you play the percentages, you play the odds. I just, and I understand too, the point that I'm making to a certain extent is a little moot, because you have to get past the first game. This team has not won a playoff game in its history. So that in and of itself is an accomplishment. I just see Philly away, a team that would have the rest, the best home record in the East, and just everything that goes along with it. The biggest goal differential in MLS this season. They're plus 42 right now. Just ran away with that. That team just scares me, I guess, is what I'm saying. They played really well, don't get me wrong. But
right, yeah, and I mean, I understand that I mean, at some point you've got to beat somebody good if you want to get to the final. I mean, at that point, it's going to come down to it at some point, and I just don't think that you should shy away from it. In my personal opinion. Now,
and this team hasn't, but
no,
I am fully on the record that I'm shying away from it. Like, that game scares me. That game,
yeah. Well, it should scare everybody, honestly. I mean, it definitely should scare everybody. But nonetheless, I do want to make a point to you guys that I don't think we've talked about yet. I looked at not only the Eastern Conference standings, I looked at the Western Conference standings and the Supporters Shield standings. Inter Miami, with a win against Montreal, depending on results from Red Bulls and Dallas, will finish as the 6th best team in all of MLS. All of MLS. They can finish as a top 6 team. Right now, they're sitting in 8th with LA Galaxy and Nashville right behind them. But with a Red Bulls draw or loss, a Dallas draw or loss, Miami ends up being the 6th best team in MLS. What does that say for how this team has turned around this year? Starting off without a win in 5 games.
A lot of people need to apologize. That's all I'll say.
I mean, yeah, look at it from this perspective too, Austin, right? is that Inter Miami started the season off 0-1-4. Philly started the season off 4-1-0. So you take that 12-point gap. Right now, the gap between them is 16 points. So if you take away the first 5 games of the season, Inter Miami over the course of this season is 14 wins, 5 draws, 9 losses. That's what, something like close to 2 points per game. That would firmly put you in a normal MLS season. If you were through 28 games, right, with 6 to play, and you had, what is that? That's 50 points, right? It's 47 points. 47 points, right? In through that same time frame. If you were able to have that with 6 games to play in a regular MLS season, you would be talking about potentially at least being the number 1 seed, if not possibly being in a supporter shield race. So what they've done outside of that first 5-game debacle, they're also +4 over the course of the entire season in goal differential since those first 5 games. So what they've done over the longevity of the season, this isn't like some 4-game fluke that a lot of people have been talking about, right? Once that Chicago loss happened, everybody said, "Oh, that's it, it's over." Well, not everybody, but a lot of people did. And I think that we on here were saying this team has gone on run. They went on 2 runs. This being the 3rd this season. But if you look at it not in terms of specific little tidbits over the course of the year, but you look at the longevity of now what is 28 games. This team is one of the best teams in Major League Soccer. They have a 50% winning record in those 28 games. In MLS, wins are everything. You're seeing it right now. The only reason that Inter Miami clinched last night is because of the win factor. And so their ability to win is huge. Look at the difference between Miami and Columbus. Miami has the ability to win. Columbus has the ability not to lose. And look at where those 2 teams are right now and how those 2 teams are feeling heading into last weekend of the season. It tells you all you need to know about each of those eked out wins in the 90th minute that we were talking about. It goes a long way, especially in this league.
One thing I want to point out, in 2021, Phil Neville had a lot of really nice words for what Gary Smith was doing with Nashville and the ability not to lose. And at first, it seemed like that was going to be the mentality going into the next season with the roster overhaul and everything like that. How grateful are we that that is not what this team has done? And they've actually gone out and gone wins, because with 6 draws on the year and 14 wins, you look at a team like Columbus, like you just mentioned, or even a team like Cincinnati with only 11 and 10 wins respectively, 13 draws and 16 draws respectively, right under you in the table. And you're sitting pretty completely confirmed for the playoffs, while all 3 of those on decision day have a huge game ahead. So for me, it's exactly what you just said, Ian. It's not about your ability not to lose in MLS anymore. It's really about your ability to win. And Miami have found ways to win in the dire moments. I think back to the 1-0 Seattle win. I think back to the 2-1 Minnesota win. I think back to this win last night against Orlando. Finding those Columbus after a 2.5-hour rain delay to win 1-0. Charlotte's another one. I mean, those are the game changers. Those are the ones that separate you from the rest, and that's what has happened. And now you go into decision day a little bit more comfortable than you thought you were going to be, because we all even said when I look back at that predictions podcast that we did earlier on in the season, we all agreed it was coming down to decision day if Inter Miami were going to be in the playoffs. But guess what? We're about 4 days removed from decision day, and Inter Miami are a playoff team. And it is because their ability to win, and I'm very glad that this team has taken that route, and it shows to what they've done in the change in mentality and the fortitude of what they've done this season and the players they brought in. It's been outstanding.
Tactically, Alex, that shows, right? Because even Phil last night said that he wanted to get all of his attacking options. He wanted to be as attacking as possible. And that's music to my ears. But the fact that he's really been in this attack mode as much as possible lately really has gone a long way for this team to be scoring goals and trying to win games.
Oh, you broke up there, but yeah.
Okay. I'm just saying that the attacking mentality. Sorry about that, but the attacking mentality to get all the people on the field as much as possible to be pushing down the field to get those goal. I mean, to score 4, right? How many goals they scored? They're scoring at a high rate now, 46 goals on the season, I think, or 45. To do that, it is, like Austin said, the change in mentality is also the change in tactics.
Yeah, I think switching to a 4-4-2 diamond has been key to that. Especially when Pozuelo plays, the three midfielders and in midfield they have a really cool, good work rate, so they're able to essentially act as wingers in a sense and have that one double pivot. But that number 10 has freedom, and he'll have 3 other guys behind him, essentially cleaning up and sweeping anything that comes wayward. Last night we saw that with Vasilev, who had a really great game. We've talked about how maybe he should come off the bench, but maybe he's not a winger. Maybe he's better centrally and with his work rate and whatnot. So, yeah, it was just a really good formational display from Neville. Switching from a winger heavy 4-3-3 or a back 5 to this 4-4-2 diamond or 4-3-1-2, depending on what you want to call it. It's helped Miami. And unfortunately for guys like Lassiter, even though he scored and got an assist, 2 assists, I think. Yeah, I've got to double check. He did things on the field. Guys like Lassiter and Taylor, who are natural wingers, they're forced to either play as a central striker or a midfielder. But yeah, it's been working. And against Orlando, they were able to nullify a lot of the things that they did through the middle, and it worked out. So kudos to them.
Real quick, how do you do that now with Campana out? Phil saying that he only has one available striker for Sunday against Montreal, that being Higuain. So with Campana out, can you still run the 4-3-1-2, 4-4-2 diamond, whatever you want to call it? And how can Lassiter play that role? Do you throw Pozuelo if he's healthy up there? He wasn't even on the bench last night, so who knows if he'll be available on Sunday? But what are your options there?
I think it depends. I think you can throw Lassiter up there and it'll work fine. We saw it last night. Or you can play Pozuelo there and then start Bryce Duke again. And so you'll have that solid foundation of Gregory Mata, Duke as a third central midfielder. Actually, I don't know. 3-4. You can throw Pozuelo up top. Duke. Maybe you can start Robert Taylor in the hole. I don't know. There's a lot of options, but it's possible. They have the depth. Crazy to say, Inter Miami has depth in positions to be able to do that. So, yeah, I think it all depends. They could just throw Lassiter up there. Maybe Emerson can get a start. He looked lively when he came on. Pozuelo will be back. Hopefully, Campana's not out for long. But, yeah, there's plenty of options.
Austin, we were talking about Gonzalo last night. He scores another brace. If Lassiter passes him the ball on his own goal, I think he probably gets the hat trick too. Got a standing ovation when he walked off. He was jumping up and down, dancing by the goal with the supporters for what felt like forever at the end of the game last night. Spoke to the media for whatever felt like forever as well. Phil even said after the game that he didn't understand why maybe he shouldn't retire. Maybe he should run it back again.
Yeah.
And that, he said that he's having the most fun that he's ever had in his career. Phil called it the biggest compliment a player can give you. It all seems to be riding high for Gonzalo. He has announced his retirement. So assuming that is still valid, this is like a dream for how a player wants to go out. But just his play again last night, it's shocking to me to hear the story, which we all knew, but now Phil has come out and said, was that he came in a couple days after being during the time when he was benched, and told Phil that he was going to retire at the end of the year. And then the next I think it was 2 days later, was when he started this whole goal scoring tear that he's on. And just, I guess, to say, they have the heartbeat kits and they have the heartbeat player in Gonzalo right now is the biggest understatement I possibly could say.
Yeah, you could tell that this whole team is rallying behind him. I mean, there was a video that the club posted after the game where they were all like in like the little circle, the Ted Lasso circle thing that Phil Neville does at the end of games.
Yeah.
Phil Neville was starting the Gonzalo, and then they would all say Higuain. Like the players were doing that themselves. Like I know the fans did that during the game, but the players themselves were doing that. And if that doesn't, show you enough about how much this team is rallying behind Gonzalo and what he's doing, I don't know what else does other than the fact that he scored 8 goals in his last 7 games in 5 straight. I think it is, or something ridiculous like that. He's just been such an inspiration for these guys. It seems like on and off the pitch. I know we talked about it earlier in the week on our last podcast, but the way Mabika spoke about him, the way the media has spoken about him, the things that he was saying about this club and throughout the season, the way he did not count himself out after coming to the decision he was going to retire, and got back and took Campana's injury, as unfortunate as it was, as a site to go out and play a lot better and rally the team behind his back and play some of the best football he's played in a very, very long time. To not count yourself out after making that decision and the situation that you were in is extremely inspiring. And I think that what he's doing right now gives everybody around the league a thought that, man, maybe this Miami team is for real. Maybe behind Gonzalo Higuain, maybe behind this statement game that they just put out against Orlando in a must-win match, this team is for real. And if there's any time that Miami have had, and this is what I wanted to ask him post-game, and I did ask him post-game, if there's any chance that Miami had to be successful down the stretch in MLS playoffs, this is the best chance they've had in 3 seasons. Obviously, in 2020, you go into the playoffs, expanded playoffs. COVID struck a lot of the top players, Gonzalo Higuain included. 2021 was not Phil Neville's roster, did not make the playoffs. 2022, Higuain's playing the best football of his career. Phil Neville has a system and a roster quality that he's not had in his 2 seasons here. And the way they're in form right now behind Gonzalo has just been something that you look at and say, you know what, this team has potential to at least win a couple games in the playoffs, and hopefully for their sake live out Gonzalo's dream of retiring as a champion.
Shout out to Mike Marinelli too, the Dry Pink Stadium PA announcer who did the old Napoli Gonzalo Higuain after the
and it worked
goal.
Very well.
It was epic. So yeah, big shout out to Mike for that. Guys, let's close out with talking about Montreal decision day and a team that does present a lot of challenges, an impressive 2-2 draw for Inter Miami earlier this season. Phil has multiple times this season called them at times one of the best. At times he thought they were the best team in the Eastern Conference, a team that can hit you in many different ways. And really you look to find a weakness. I don't really see one that they have. So they're very formidable. They have a lot of like really good players across the board. And so it really becomes a question of how do you attack Alex and especially with a depleted roster. If Pozuelo can't go, assuming that Campana and Coco are out as well, where are you going to find the offense come Sunday?
Higuain, obviously. I know he said he's not going to push Gonzalo too much, but I can see him playing for 60 minutes if nothing's really happening. Lassiter Lassiter will probably start. Maybe Emerson will come on. Excuse me. I don't know. Maybe we'll call up an Inter Miami CF2 player. I don't know if that's still in the cards at this point in the season. But I think it's going to be heavily rotated. We saw Breck Shea come back, so maybe he'll start. Maybe Kieran Gibbs, Victor Joe maybe will start. Emerson is definitely in contention. So plenty of options. I think Bryce Duke will go again. He did look a little gassed at the end of the game last night, but there's plenty of options, and Neville will be smart about it. He wants to get that home playoff game, but at the same time, you don't want to risk your players further injury when you do end up in the playoffs and you have to play. So it really all depends. It's hard to predict these things because with Neville especially, he'll line up in a back 3, but it's essentially a back 4 with 3 central midfielders behind a 10, and it's impossible to know. So obviously we'll know more once the lineup sheet comes out on Sunday. But I think definitely going to be rotational side: Emerson, Lassiter, Duke, maybe Ujoa, Breck Shea, maybe Harvey Neville. We don't know. We don't want DeAndre Yedlin getting knocked over again. before the playoffs. So yeah, it all depends, and I do think Ryan Taylor will play probably just to get him some minutes as well.
If I honestly, if I'm the coach, if I'm Phil Neville, I still need to be sure in this diamond midfield that I've put out, be sure in the back line I've put out, be sure in the attackers I've put out without Campana. Like I'm going out and at least playing 45, 60 minutes with guys that I want to make this formation perfect going into the playoffs. So I'm not necessarily not rotating, but at the same time, I think a guy like Gregory needs to get back in next to Jean Mota. I think a guy like Bryce Duke also needs to play if he's going to be a third or fourth midfielder. I think I keep the partnership between Lowe and Mabika. I don't think you play Sailor right now because it looks like those are your best two center backs. I think Higuain needs to play up top, and you need to see how this midfield and this diamond can work off of him. There are certain things that still need to be perfected. And honestly, the last two games, the way this diamond midfield has worked has been great, but I'm not going to get them off their form a week away from a playoff game. I think that you need to stick with it, whether because practices are not always necessarily enough, and you have one more chance to have them up to game speed. For me, you need to put out almost your best lineup. I'm probably saving Pozuelo because of the injury. That's probably the only one that I'm saving. Obviously, with the Campana injury, it throws a wrench in the plan, the two striker plan. And by the way, all the best to him. It did not look pretty. But with that said, I think I need to still see more and keep these guys in their partnerships, in game action, up to game speed going into the playoffs. Because if you don't do that, then it's like a week and a half, almost 2 weeks rest where you don't have them in game form on the pitch together. And that's kind of where my concern comes in.
And I agree with you on a lot of that. I would say to Pozuelo, maybe you throw him on the bench and he's like a 75th, 80-minute sub just to
give him some like 10 minutes,
some work in. But hey, listen, there's a reason that you can have these conversations. Why? Because they're in. All that's left now is who their playoff opponent is going to be, or if it's going to be a home playoff game. Again, the scenario, if Inter Miami beats Montreal on decision day, all the Eastern Conference games are the exact same kickoff time, 2:30. And if Inter Miami beats Montreal, and if Red Bulls lose or draw, Inter Miami will be the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. Their first round matchup will be at home against Red Bulls. Their second round matchup will be at Philadelphia. That is the scenario. Everything else, they're most likely the 5th seed, just with all the scenarios and permutations. They could go anywhere between 4 and 7. One thing is for certain, the first round matchup will be against Red Bulls or NYCFC. Barring something crazy, they still could potentially play Montreal or Philadelphia, but that would be like crazy town. So it's almost certain that it'll be one of the New York teams in the first round of the 2022 MLS Cup Playoffs for your Inter Miami Herons. He is Austin Roblard. She is Alex Winley. For our producer, Andres, and for all of South Florida celebrating being back in the playoffs now for Inter Miami. And what a night it was at Drive Pink Stadium. I'm Ian Hest. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, on YouTube, on Twitter at the Heron Outlet. Like, share, subscribe, listen on Spotify, give us a comments, a rate, review, all that fun stuff. And we will see you on Decision Day and in the MLS Cup Playoffs.